EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody, to a Wednesday edition of Birds 365. Back here in our normal time slot here, 8 to 10 a.m. We'll be live 8 to 10 a.m. for the next couple of days before another change next week in the camp schedule. Johnny Mac, how you doing on this Wednesday morning, brother?
Hanging in. A little bit of a respite walkthrough today for the Philadelphia Eagles. So big public practice, the only public practice on Thursday night. So a little bit of a lull. Then they're going to have essentially off Friday and Saturday. And then you get ramped up again for probably the busiest streak of the summer, 4 consecutive practices. So a little bit of lull before those four straight practices.
As you mentioned, walk through today. So, and then tomorrow, the big open public practice. I'm interested if anybody in the chat is heading down to the link. Johnny Mac will be down at the link for the practice. So we'll see how that develops. John, let's real quick. How is the calf? How's everything going on the Johnny Mac?
Yeah.
Well,
I'm
Johnny
very
had to
happy.
run in with a cameraman,
Yeah.
and he strained the calf.
I'm very happy we have a walkthrough today. I'll just say that. I would have been in danger of missing a practice for the first time in a long time. So I'm very happy it worked out the way it did. And we'll see. Day to day. I always say everybody's day to day, and that's why I say it.
That's absolutely true. July 31st, everybody. Summer's moving right along here. End of July. Today is the last day of July before we move into August. I think it's 37 days till we kick off in Sao Paulo, Brazil. So everything is moving right along. We have a good show for you guys planned today. Mike Gill is set to join us in around 16 minutes or so at 8:20 in our first hour. And then Brandon Lee Gowton, who's been down at the NovaCare Complex with Johnny Mac watching practice, will join us in hour number 2. So 2 good guests today. We'll bring 2 different perspectives into the show, and we will continue to talk about what's going on in Eagles training camp, how they are developing, how the offense is looking, the defense is looking, Vic Fangio, all things important on the Philadelphia Eagles. So thank you all for being here. I want to welcome everybody in this morning. Crowley's in here, James Carver's in here, Prince, Suplex, Christopher Baker, Callie Baby, Bruce Banner, Mike Fittery, Madness, a bunch of our most loyal listeners. I see you all. Appreciate you all for being here. Make sure you guys drop a like on the show, as it's the best thing you can do to help us grow. So we appreciate that. Johnny Mac, let's move into our training camp talk. We had a show around 12 hours ago, so it's not like this stuff isn't too super fresh for us. But I want to ask, you're 5 days into camp. How different is training camp this year than it was last year? They talked about a little bit of a heightened intensity. We talked about that they ran practice yesterday for an hour, 40 minutes. I think that's pretty significant compared to what they did last year. Like I said, I don't have it off the top of my head, but I think that's the longest practice they've had in the last couple of years. What's the difference in training camp this year, or is there no difference at all?
There's a little bit, but not. I don't think there's as much as people expected from a standpoint. I think there was that narrative going around that there'd be more practices, longer practices, things like that. Maybe a little bit, but Nick said we're going to be at the bottom of the league from that standpoint when it comes to time on the field, just because of the organizational belief, and that's continuing. So it's tweaked a little bit. They've gone. I had it at 99 minutes. I mentioned that on yesterday's show. The way the Eagles do it is they have practice and then a developmental period. So it's always a little bit longer. You're going to hear different numbers because most people count the developmental part of it as well. So they've done that. They've had longer practices, believe it or not, under Nick Sirianni. Not many, but and that's typically as long as they go. And I think that's typically as long as they will go this year. So that part of it hasn't changed. A few less off days. I say that as we get into the lull. and they haven't given us the schedule out of past next week. So that'll kind of change, and when we see that, and when that's finally unveiled, maybe we can get a better handle on how many more practices they had this year than last year. Um, but it's about the same. So, and that shouldn't be a surprise to most people because it wasn't. It's more about taking advantage of the CBA than anything else. It's not involved with um, as much to deal. In other words, you're not changing things for the coordinators. And I think a lot of people thought there would be massive changes. There haven't been massive changes.
How about the intensity level, John, of practice? Does it seem like it's high, or is it normal? You know, we had I think it was Gary Cobb or somebody on the National Football Show who was down there as well at practice, and he said the team just seems a little bit more locked in. I don't know if that was just a feeling, if that was a placebo effect. I don't know. How does the intensity level of camp so far seem to you? Is everybody locked in? Does it look like a team that's trying to get back from a collapse, or is it just same old, same old?
I think it's I think that's always I think it's more of a placebo effect to answer your question. I think that's more to do with the individual players. Like if you have like CJ's back. CJ's an energy guy, CJ Gardner Johnson. So that's notable on the field. Everybody saw it yesterday because they were up close and the defense was at the goal line. And, you know, you're 15 yards away if you're a member of the media. So you get to hear, you get to see, and he brings juice. Brandon Graham obviously would be the most obvious example of somebody like that on a daily basis. And everybody in Philadelphia should be used to that by now. But that to me is an individual player thing. And that kind of goes up and down on how many energy guys do you have. Not everybody's like that. Not everybody can bring that kind of juice and talk and, you know, keep everybody hyped up. So, you know, maybe because of the return of somebody like CJ Gardner Johnson, it might seem that way. But I'm not going to sit here and say they weren't locked in last year. They started 10-1.
Yeah, right.
And coming off now, they had a short off season because of going to the Super Bowl. So
Right.
I think everybody was a little bit didn't have the rejuvenation maybe they typically have if you lose earlier, but you don't want to lose earlier. So I think that's a year-to-year thing, and more than that, it's a player-to-player thing. How many energy guys do you have? But if you're not locked in as a player, you know, obviously you have your core group, but there's 90 guys, and a lot of them are fighting for jobs. And if you're not locked in any year, whether it's a 3-14 team or a 14-3 team, you know, your NFL career's in the balance. So generally, I think that stuff's a little bit overrated, a little bit of a placebo type thing.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So
How about any themes, John? Any themes emerging? You know, we put. I'm going to go to this comment here from our friend Prince, and it's a good comment. And you know, I don't know whether he's right or not, but he says a lot of focus on conditioning and concepts. Are there any themes like that emerging in your eyes where, you know, maybe it is conditioning, maybe that's what the team is focused on, maybe it is the concepts and picking up the new coordinator's language and terms and all those things. Is there anything emerging in your eyes that seems to be a theme that the Eagles are focused on, you know, more than something else that they want to get right for this year?
well, I think that showed up more in the spring when it came to the terminology and it came to the struggles of the offense. I think things have gotten much smoother as we've gotten to the summer, and that's a good thing because that's a probable indication that people were doing a little bit more than vacationing during the 6-7 weeks off. So that's a good thing. And then I think they've been more thematic in practice. You know, working on certain things, certain days. Yesterday was red zone for the first time, and they were red zone and just red zone. for the most part. The day before, it seemed to be just peppering the backs out of the backfield, trying to get them involved. I think they settled into more of a focused, all right, this day's for this day's for this. And there's some of that in the past as well, but I think it was more varied. And I think it's been more focused this time.
Let's get into yesterday real quick. We talked about it. For those who missed last night's show, we had a 6 to 8 p.m. last night show. So we broke down about as extensively as you could break down one practice in a 2-hour show. We broke down the padded practice. But there's one thing I forgot to ask you, John, and that's our MVP of the day, or our player of the day, which we started up over the weekend. We had a little bit of a different structure the first 2 days of the week here this week. Was there a player yesterday that you can give your player of the day to for the first day in pads that everybody was all jacked up about?
I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go Jaylen Carter.
Ooh, I like it.
Yeah, he's. I wouldn't be surprised after this season when Ed Kratz and I do our top 25 Eagles. He's number one.
Wow, that good over AJ Brown.
I wouldn't be surprised at all.
You had AJ Brown at one this year, right?
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised at all. Just from a default setting, he is the most talented football player the Eagles have.
And what have you seen from him out there at practice? I know everybody talked about him moving Mekhi Becton out of the way, but what else has stuck out to you in the practices so far through camp from Jaylen Carter?
It's just incredibly gifted. I mean, he's one of those guys. He's almost impossible to block. And the conditioning part is going to be a big aspect because he's got to play a lot and he's got to be the same guy on snap 1 as snap 50. And that he wasn't, and that's pretty much the next step for him. And if he can get to that level, yeah, I think you're talking about a player who ultimately, very quickly, is going to be in Defensive Player of the Year conversations. And you haven't had that for the most part in Philadelphia for a long time. I think he's going to be in those conversations pretty consistently. I'm not going to say he's going to win it 3 in a row like J.J. Watt or Aaron Donald or somebody like that. But he's going to be like a top 5 guy pretty consistently when you talk about Defensive Player of the Year voting. That's how gifted he is.
Can't wait to see what he turns into and how he develops. Seems like he's, pretty focused and understands what his potential is. So hopefully he can continue to reach it and work and get to that level. Because I think I'm with you. I mean, just from what you saw last year, the guy is obviously very talented player. This is a good question here, John, in the chat. I want to go to my buddy Quan Pugh. Quan, thanks for being here, brother. He says, what position group looks best put together overall? So through the first 5 days of practice, John, that's a good question. What is the best position group that you see right now on this roster?
It's a good question. When you add the depth into it, I think I would have expected it to be the offensive line, but they've been so dinged up. I don't think it's been the offensive line because of those injuries. And luckily, none of them are serious, but you've had so many moving parts because guys have been dealing with little things here and there. I think it's a defensive front. With Carter and Davis and Milton Williams has had a good camp, and Nolan Smith has had a good camp. Mostly against Fred Johnson, but still, it's a positive, and he's gotten bigger. So he showed up. I think Josh Sweat is nobody's talked about Josh Sweat, but I think that's because he's just solid every day. I'm a little disappointed with Bryce Huff so far. I don't think it's time to panic. Brandon's Brandon. He's going to give you legitimate snaps, and I think you've seen little flashes from guys like Marlon Tuipulotu and Moro Ajomo and even PJ Mustipher as depth pieces. I think overall it's been the defensive front, and they've kind of carried the defense as a whole, which was struggling from a coverage perspective. And the last 2 days with some of the interior issues on the offensive line, they've been really getting after the quarterback. So I think overall I'm going to go defensive front. I say that because I'm counting the interior players and the edge rushers as well.
And how's Jordan Davis look? Just an update on him. A lot of eyes on him coming into the year on the conditioning. I know you're not going to see much on the conditioning yet. Obviously, you know, that matters when you're 40, 50, 60 games into or plays into a game. But how has he looked at camp so far? I know I read yesterday that he blew up a couple plays or
Yeah, I
maybe
mean he's great. He's great for his role. And you know, Clint Hurt was talking about it. You know, same thing with Chandler. He's got to play more, so he's got to get in better shape. And he's done all the, you know, at least cosmetic things. You know, until we see it, he looks slimmer, all that stuff. But it's not about cosmetic; it's about conditioning.
yeah, the
So
cosmetics were never really the problem with him. I know Jordan is a big guy, but he's not like he wears his weight well. If you see Jordan in person, your first takeaway isn't that he's overweight, you know, it's not.
yeah, but even from when you saw him at the Maxwell Award, he is leaner from
Yeah, he is
that. And
definitely
it, and
for
it, and
sure.
it wasn't. You're right. He wasn't even bad from that perspective, considering his job. And So, but to me, that's not the big part. The big part is the conditioning part. But you know, early in games, he's really difficult to block. That's what Clint said. Um, and then he tends to wear down, and that's where the conditioning part comes into it. But you know, in a practice setting, he's generally, you know, getting a couple reps, coming off, getting
Right.
rest. He looks dominant, and that's got to carry over to being that full-time player on essentially game days. And by full time, you're always going to rotate on the offensive line. For him, you're probably looking 40 to 50 reps a game. You want him at, if you can get him there. And those are effective, you know, but the one is the same as 40. You know, if 1 through 20 are great and then it starts to deteriorate, that's not as good.
Yeah, so we'll continue to monitor that. I think it's very positive. You know, Quan, thanks for the question, brother. Asked that question about the position groups, and you go D line. Remember, we did just lose a Hall of Fame caliber type of player in Fletcher Cox. So to go there and say that, I think shows that Howie made some good decisions in the last couple of years. Now, you know, a couple of them fell into his lap with Jaylen Carter. I think he's, like you mentioned, has the leeway to make a pick like that with all the other things. But, I mean, to replace a guy like Fletcher Cox isn't an easy thing to do. And for you to say that the best position group so far has been the D-line right after Fletcher retires, I think that's a very positive thing. I think that shows that their team-building process is working. They know what they're doing to replace their biggest players. And that's a very positive thing, obviously, because the defensive line is the most important part of the defense in many ways.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be. It's got to be on this team. I mean, it has to be. You know, you think about the historic drop off from 2022 to 2023, and the 70 plus sacks. You're not going to get that many sacks too often. But you know, the defensive front carried the defense in the Super Bowl season, and they weren't as good last year, and that exposed some of the deficiencies on the back end. Now they've gotten more talented on the back end, and we'll see how it develops as Vic settles down. So they should be better there. Talked about linebacker extensively. I have some questions there, more than most.
Yeah,
it seems. But yeah, they're the best group. They have to carry things. Bryce Hupp has got to be a difference maker, so I'm not trying to understate that. And Nolan's got to step up. There's a lot of question marks, and they continue. They're not the conditioning of Carter and Davis, we haven't. There's 5 practices. I'm not saying that's what they're going to be. Just that through 5 practices, that to me looks like the best position group because of the depth. Obviously, the best position group among the starters is receiver, but there's no depth. Right. So I don't know if that's what the question was as a whole. But the Eagles' best position is A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. But after that.
Yeah, right. No, I see what you're saying for sure. Alfredo says, is there no practice today? Moving on, John. No practice today. They have a walkthrough, so no media availability. They will be back on the practice field tomorrow, but it's the open practice, so it's a different structure. We'll be live in the morning because it's the open practice down at the link. So it's happening at night. All the things are later on in the day. So we will have our morning Birds 365 both tomorrow and Friday in our normal time slot. So walk through today, no media availability. So we will get no updates on that front. Let's move into our first commercial break. Mike Gill coming up next on Birds 365. Good to bring in another perspective with the moving shows. We haven't had as many guests recently, so excited to hear from Mike Gill. It'll be our first time talking to Mike in I think 2 weeks. So let's get to our first commercial break. Thanks everybody for being here. A lot of great comments already this morning. Appreciate all you guys. Make sure you drop a like. Stay tuned. Mike Gill coming up next on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights or reminds you to go with the flow, to get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Win and save this baseball season from Colony Pools and Power Washing, a local company serving Delaware, Delco, and Chester County since 1970. Are you tired of looking at your green house? Is your roof, siding, deck stained green from algae and mold? Let the experts pressure wash your home and take the pressure off of you. Win with Colony Pools and Power Washing. Call them now at 302-762-2250. That's 302-762-2250.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Up. And go Birds.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles. EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back into a Wednesday edition of Birds 365, joined now by Mike Gill from 97.3 ESPN, the best sports show down the shore in South Jersey. Mike, how you doing, man? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing all right, guys. I'm doing all right. What's happening?
What's up, bud? we haven't talked on this show as well. Mike and I talk on his show, but I want to get your perspective from your text board when you hear from your listeners what they've kind of focused in on when it comes to training camp, what they've been most interested in, because I'm always interested to see where they're going with it.
That's a good question, because it's kind of been all over the map. We put it out there of what stories so far, and I thought a lot was going to be centered around the things that we kind of look at, right? The secondary, what's going on with that cornerback room. Everybody wants to know about the rookies, how much Quinyon Mitchell is going to play. But a lot of questions are coming in about Barkley and how they're using him and what part of the offense he's going to be. That turned into a big topic of conversation on Monday's show about Saquon Barkley and how he's fitting in, based on one of the comments that Sirianni said the other day about how much command he's shown of the offense. Jalen Hurts, intermediate throws, downfield throws, but then he kind of said shuffling his feet and throwing the ball to Saquon and Gainwell, and that kind of sparked the conversation of everybody loves the conversation for some reason, John, of throwing the ball to the running back and how much that's going to be a part of this offense. So that little comment from Nick Sirianni, I think, kind of sparked a lot of our listeners to say, well, are they going to use Barkley in the backfield? Are they going to throw him the ball? They haven't been doing that over the years. So I think people kind of want to see if that's going to be a bigger part of this offense than it's been under Nick the first 3 years.
Yeah, that's interesting, because it from the perspective of throwing the ball to the backs and Saquon as a whole, for the fans at training camp, Mike, it's been, he gets the most cheers. It's interesting because, there was a little bit, they were doing a ton of red zone work yesterday. There was 6 touchdowns because, you're always pounding the ball in the end zone. You have some good plays, bad plays, a lot of touchdowns. His touchdown got the biggest cheer. It was a little run up the middle, nice play. But, it was like Jim Brown was out there. It's interesting that the dynamic that the fans have. They are really excited about Saquon Barkley.
Hey, look, you spent a lot of money on a piece. The interesting part is I think fans liked Miles and wanted him to be a bigger part of the offense. And then you go back and look, Miles Sanders had 1,200 yards and 11 touchdowns the Super Bowl season for them. That's a huge year. I mean, 1,200 yards and 11 touchdowns is a monster year. So I guess, you go back to Miles' first year, he had 50 catches and 63 targets. He was a guy that could have been an all-around back. They just don't use their back like that. So I think the Eagles fans might be saying, if you put this kind of investment, Miles, you didn't want to pay. You bought Swift here and, let him walk to bring Barkley in and paid Barkley a lot. I guess the notion is you want a bigger role for this guy than those two guys have. But you go back and look at the production that Miles had and
massive production
last year. Right.
Yeah.
You had a lot of production from that position. So because you paid more now for that position, are you going to put more of a focus on even more production from that position?
Well, one more follow-up. Sorry, Zander.
It's
it's interesting because you brought up Nick's comments correctly about him saying one of the impressive things about Jaylen is, shuffling his feet, dumping it off, being willing to take that instead of maybe trying to extend things all the time. But he also said that same press conference, if people missed it, obviously, the passing offense goes through AJ, Devontae, Dallas, and then it becomes, all right, the rest of the puppies at the, the litter, you're getting the scraps after those guys. And that includes the running backs. So there's not going to be this massive sea change.
Does that include Dallas?
Yeah, he said Dallas. Yeah, he said those 3 guys.
I only throw that in there because, there's a lot of buzz about Grant Calcaterra, and that would assume that maybe the tight ends are going to be a bigger part of this offense. They were a bigger part of the LA Charger offense than they were.
Ellen has a history. They played a lot of 12 personnel in practice, and there has been. I think Grant will be more involved. But Nick specifically mentioned AJ, Devontae, Dallas. That's it. And that's what should be, by the way. You should fire him if it isn't. So and he did bring up the old adage of there's only one football and there's only a certain amount of plays. And I think that was a little preparing people, so to speak.
Well, we saw it last year. Was it last year, the one year where A.J. Brown had all the targets and Smith got none, and he won the game? It was like, well, A.J. Smith didn't get any targets. Well, that's life sometimes. So it might be a week-to-week proposition. Which guy is going to be the focus of the offense this week? Is it Brown that gets 12 catches, 10 catches, 12 targets? Is it Smith that gets the 8 catches and 10 targets? Is it Goddard that has, it might bounce around from week to week. That's just life in the NFL when you have a lot of good players. Sometimes you go in that meeting room and say, all right, Dallas, this is your week. We're game planning you to be the big guy because of what this defense shows us. And we think this is your week to have the big week. The players have to be okay with that. And I'm sure some weeks, most of the time they are. But, it's people like us who look back and say, well, why didn't Smith get the ball this week? Well, it wasn't in the game plan because of what, X's defense generally shows on tape.
Yeah. Mike, you're doing a daily show. You're talking to a lot of guys who are down there. Johnny Mack, one of them. I'll ask you the same question John asked about your listeners. What stuck out to you outside of the passing of the running back? What's a storyline that you've taken from camp so far? We're just over a week into this thing. A lot of storylines, a lot of talk about young players, different players. What stuck out to you so far through the first 5 practices?
Well, you hit on the young player thing, Quinyon Mitchell, and what they're doing with him, kind of moving him all over the place. Howie said something the other day. I think he was on the Up and Adams show, and we played that audio about young players. And it's one of the things you love about camp is watching them progress and then progress up the depth chart. So as much as we all love to see what the rookies are going to do, you want to see where they end up on that depth chart and how fast they can work their way up. A lot of first-round picks, they start right at the top of the depth chart. Well, Mitchell's kind of working his way through. It's almost like a National League wild card race here where you're like trying to bounce over a bunch of teams to get to the top. You have to get by this guy, then that guy, then this guy. Well, it seems that he is making his way to the top. So that's the number one thing, I think, is where are they going to end up settling in? Now, we can't see what Cooper's up to because of the injury, but where are they going to settle in with Quinyon and then eventually Cooper when he's back and ready, and where they will factor into this defense? I think that's got to be way up at the top of the list. The James Bradbury thing has always been interesting to me. I've said it on your show, my show, is I don't know why they didn't take a look at him at least at corner. Fangio let him judge for himself. Well, apparently Bradbury went to them and said, I'll go play safety. So I thought that was interesting. How he factors into that safety spot, I still think it's a long shot, for what he's getting paid. But do you just outright eat the money? He's not a special teams guy. He doesn't seem to be in the mix at corner at all. So his future, I guess, is something there. The linebacker spot, Nolan Smith would be the other guy. Nolan Smith,
Nolan's looked very good against spread.
I've heard the Nolan Smith, Mr. Lehigh this year, right? On the defensive side of the ball.
He's been
I've
good.
heard he's bulked up, looks bigger. The question will be, whose playing time does he cut into? Is he a Bryce Huff guy? Is he a Josh Sweat guy? Where does he usurp somebody to get more snaps and more playing time? So that, to me, is going to be pretty interesting on ultimately where they decide and how they decide to use this guy.
Well, I don't think it's an issue with playing time. I think the more he can play, because that's a rotational position, and we saw last year it was evident that Hassan Reddick even, and certainly Josh Sweat, played too many snaps. So if he can get those numbers down and have a solid 4-man rotation, that's what the Eagles want.
Yeah,
and Nolan Smith has got to be a part of it. And hey, he's got plenty of snaps, and they're going to have no issue divvying those up if he performs well. And that's a big part with Bradbury. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because he hasn't taken one special team snap. He's not playing special teams. Here's my concern with Bradbury, and he hasn't played corner at all. But Vic said he's going to play some corner for us. I think the presumption that they know he can play corner, so they could say,
well, they know he can play corner, but I don't know. Maybe you're down there and can see the speed and everything. Is he just evidently not in the same class? This was a guy who was a second-team All-Pro player 2 years ago.
No, I said
I get it. Guys go from here to here pretty quick at age in the NFL. But did he have a down year, which he admitted last year? I know I didn't play well. But was that because of deteriorating play, or did he not fit what they were asking? There was a lot of reporting in there that he didn't quite like the way they were using him. So I would have at least liked to see, can I get another Pro Bowl, not even an all-pro level season out of this guy while I'm paying him? That's all. If I'm running the organization for what I paid him, I want to at least see if he can do it. And if not, then I change course. Now, I do like I say with Mekhi Becton, I got this massive man. I would have plopped him at right guard from day one and just say, you're taking every snap there because you've never done it before. Go get the experience. I'm not going to bounce you from left to here to there. Go win a position. You're the most talented guy we got. Go win it. In that instance, I can understand just locking a guy into one position. But with the Bradbury thing, I don't know. Do they really think that he could go play safety at day one at camp and then be a safety that helps him? I can't imagine that. That's why I said at least give him the shot to see if he has anything left at corner. And then if you want to say, we tried you, these guys have passed you, go play safety, and then we'll figure out what to do with you after that. But I don't know.
Well, the problem is, if you heard James, I was with you. I said all off season, Zander can attest to this. I was like, I think he's a perfect fit for Vic Fangio. He's a zone corner.
Right there with you. Yep. Yeah.
And speed has never been a big part of his game anyway. So when you talk about guys dropping off the table, it's generally because they lose a step. Well, he never had the step to begin with. He's always been a slower zone corner from that perspective. So I thought, he could have a bounce back year with Vic Fangio. But then they drafted Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. And at that point it becomes, and that's why James said, well, look what they did. And they also brought in Rodgers. So he's like, if I'm going to have a role, I'm going to have to do something else. And that's the decision from his perspective. Here's my problem from Howie's perspective by kicking the can down the road. When you started, and James wasn't here for the OTAs, the voluntary stuff, and he got hurt at the start of minicamp. So he didn't do anything in the spring. And the second team safeties were Tristan McCullum and Mekhi Gardner. Very young players. Maybe they have an upside. Maybe they don't. Only the Eagles know what they really believe about these players. But now they've been kicked to the third team because they're playing Bradbury and Devontae Maddox as the second team safeties. So you're taking away, and for those who have never been to a football practice, the first team gets the most reps. The second team gets pretty significant reps. The third team, it's like being the fourth receiver on the Eagles. You get scraps. You don't get a lot of reps. And the young players are getting reps taken away. So if this whole thing is about
the whole concept, by the way, that's a whole nother topic, which I don't understand. Why they don't have the third team and fourth team guys go on another field and mirror what's going on the main field so that they are getting the reps. But
you're making things more difficult for me, Mike. Keep that to yourself. Yeah, you can't watch 7 fields at once. No, I agree with you, by the way. But I'm glad they don't. But they don't. They have developmental periods, and that's for the lower level guys. But we're talking very few reps. And that to me doesn't make sense if your ultimate goal, and let's be honest, I think the ultimate goal is to trade James if Howie was taking truth serum and to get a conditional day 3 pick. Is that worth it? Is that worth taking away from guys who could help you for 3-4 years if you develop them correctly? I think this is a rare mistake from Howie Roseman. You drafted Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean for a reason. They're going to play. Isaiah Rodgers is going to play. James ain't going to play at corner. Can't help you on special teams. I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze, Mike.
Yeah, the whole Bradbury thing has been perplexing from the start. And I guess there's an element of, hey, we paid this guy. We got to try to figure out something to do with them. We don't want to eat the salary if we don't have to. So we'll try to see if there's any value there by moving him to safety and maybe take some calls on him. You're right. I mean, it just doesn't make a lot of sense, and I guess James, they picked up Bradbury in a year that he was coming off not having a great year. New York basically did the same thing, like, go find another job after he had a really, really good year in New York.
Yeah.
So
he did the same thing at Carolina. He's got a history of good year, bad year. He's like a baseball reliever. Well, guess what?
Exactly. Well, it's like anything in sports. You do something well, they study you on tape, they make the adjustment, you have to adjust back, and yada, yada. Here we go with the ping pong game. The greats make the adjustments, the pretty goods, sometimes. He's been really good and then not so good. Really good and then not so good. Well, this is the year I would have at least taken a chance to look to see if there was a really good still left in him. So now the question is, there was a lot of talk about Hassan Reddick when he was here. Like, he's a really good guy. He would never hold out. That's just not his personality. And now he's holding out in with the Jets. James Bradbury is, by all accounts, a pretty good guy, well-respected guy. Did the Eagles just say, and he'd go to them and say, guys, I can see the writing on the wall. You drafted 2 guys. Give me a shot to go play another position. And they just acquiesced?
Pretty much. Yeah. I mean, yeah, Big said,
right.
yeah.
So the times that, the Eagles and Howie have made mistakes in their past. Look, I like Roseman. I've never been a Roseman hater. He makes mistakes. Everybody does. It's a tough job in the NFL. I think what makes Howie separates him is he's allowed to make mistakes. Other GMs, they can't make mistakes because you're going to get fired, and that's no way to do a job. Roseman's going to make mistakes. He has made mistakes. And some of the mistakes he has made, is being a little loyal to guys, maybe longer than they should, extending players when they didn't have to. The Alshon Jeffrey obviously is the one contract that really comes to mind. But, sometimes they've hung on to like a Jason Peters too long. And there's various accounts after they used to never do that, right? The Andy Reid era.
Well, Joe Banner was more.
Right. You were gone. But
right.
Roseman has admitted in the past, hey, we thought we had a window, so maybe we hung on to some guys too long. And that was a mistake that we made. He signs Bradbury to this big deal. In part, my recollection, John, and you probably have more reporting on this than I would, but they offered C.J. Gardner-Johnson the deal. Gardner-Johnson balks, so then they go to plan B and go get Bradbury and bring him back and say, instead of losing the secondary, we'll bring Bradbury back. And that kind of backfires on them. Now, if this is the way this is all playing out.
Yeah, that their original plan was that they were going to keep 2 of the 3. Because remember, Slay, although he was under contract, the guaranteed money was done. They were going to have to make an adjustment. So they came into the process thinking they'd get Slay and CJ back and they'd lose James in free agency. And then things went south with CJ, and it ended up being James and Darius. But even Darius almost left at one point. Slay almost left for Baltimore, which he's now publicly admitted. And that was very close. And he and his wife said goodbye to the city, if you remember that.
Yeah, I remember that.
And they were on their way to Baltimore. And Big Dom was one of the ones who got slayed.
A golf cart this morning, John.
Yeah, I tweeted out Dom's golf cart, which is pretty awesome, by the way.
I think I saw it whizzing by me in Margate the other day.
Yeah, I mean he's got Eagles logo that lights up when he flips it on. He's got personalized seats.
Just to give you full disclosure, there are more golf carts zipping down Ventnor Avenue in Margate than actual cars. We're at that point now where the golf cart has outnumbered
easier to get around,
vehicle.
man.
Yes.
Easier to get around.
Yeah,
Don can get up there.
Yeah.
And Don can get up to 40 on that thing, he said.
My God. He must have tricked that thing out. He must have upgraded them. He must have supercharged
40,
that thing or something.
40. You can't drive down Ventnor Avenue at 40 miles an hour.
Yeah.
That's
and well, when Tom said that, I said, yo, man, you got to slow it down with these guys keep speeding all over the league. Don't tell them they can go 40.
Yeah,
the golf cart.
Yeah, I saw Hertz was driving and he almost backed into a pole and Howie like, hey, watch the pole. Yeah, it was pretty funny. Mike, let's move into the linebacker position. A lot of Zach Bond talk, with Devin White there lining up. There's a lot of rotation. What do you make of that position so far through the first 5 days of camp? I thought we'd hear a little bit more about Nakobe Dean at this point. What's your take on that position?
All right, so this is funny because Sirianni the other day named 13 different wide receivers. He went through the whole list, and he named them all. Fangio also named almost every linebacker in the room the other day. Oh, Bond, we like him. He's never played the position. We think he could do it. Devin, he's a professional. Nakobe, he went all the way through the list of guys. And his answers were a lot shorter. And I said, well, is that his way of saying I got nothing here? It's funny because I'm interested, John, to see. I know Trotter, did he get hurt the other day?
He had cramps. Okay. It wasn't an injury. It was really
I was reading Chris Trapasso over at CBS Sports had his all rookie team, and he has Trotter as the first team all rookie linebacker.
I'm guessing he's an Eagles fan, right?
I said to myself, does he know something that I don't know? Is he getting on the field? Is he in the mix here? Or is that just a prognostication of how bad the Eagles linebackers appear to be?
I'll ask Jeff Kerr. He's probably an Eagles fan, would be my guess.
Okay. Well, yes. I was, and he had him, ahead of Corley and Colston and some of the other guys who got drafted. So to answer that question, I think it's a fluid situation because while Devin White seems to be pretty locked in, you said there hasn't been a lot of Nakobe Dean talk, but I think that they seem to be at least much like we're talking about Bradbury playing safety, Bond playing a position he hasn't played before, but more willing to let him play that position. I don't know. Do they look at him? I think we brought this up a couple of weeks ago. Like, is there a guy on that linebacker crew that they see as kind of like their Van Ginkel where they can just kind of mold him into that type of player that they want?
Not yet. In fact, well, I guess the closest one would be Julian Okwara. And boy, he's getting trashed when he's trying to cover backs out of the backfield. So people are going to be very upset if he rolls out the Andrew Van Ginkel role, unless Zach Bond can morph into that. They were college teammates, by the way, Zach Bond and Andrew Van Ginkel. But yeah, that flat defender is going to be a problem if he keeps using it with the guys they have playing it right now. And I'm not sure they have that player. That's a difficult player to get. I'm a little surprised the Eagles didn't go after him in free agency, but he was coming off a Liz Frank injury, so maybe that factored into it. He missed the end of last season. To your point about Trotter, though, he's gotten some first team reps, not a lot. And I've said this to Zander a bunch of times, Mike. The whole linebacker room's almost interchangeable. Like, I feel as good with Devin White and Nakobe Dean as Trotter and Ben Van Sumeren. I don't think there'd be that much of a difference. I really don't.
Yeah, and like the fact that Nakobe Dean has trailed into that group, you were hoping he was going to pull away from that group.
Well, I think he is going to pull away. I think he's,
but not so significantly, like you said. Like, it could be one or the other. He might win it, but not because he's far and away the best option.
Well, that I agree with. Yeah. I don't think they have good linebackers. I mean,
at this point, John, is Bond ahead of Dean right now?
It's technically, again, it depends how they've had 5 practices. All 5 practices have started with Devin White and Zach Bond as the starting linebackers. But the Kobe's, then they go to 7-on-7s, and it's Devin White and Nakobe Dean. Then they go to red zone, and Nakobe Dean's the only linebacker on the field at one point. So, and as I said, Vic is rotating guys like crazy. So Ben's gotten first team reps, Ben Van Sumeren. Jeremiah Trotter's gotten first team reps. They've all gotten first team reps. Oren Burks, I've said the only reason he hasn't is because he's hurt. I just think he's trying to figure it out. With the exception of Devin White, he seems to believe that Devin White is going to be the guy, the best linebacker on the team, which is a concern to me, Mike. But
well, Fangio said the other day, if I have young players, I'll play them if they're the best players out there. Do we trust him on that? Or is that just
no,
hyperbole there?
He's a play the best player guy.
Okay, so then,
but
if Ben Van Sumeren and Zach Bond are the best two, they'll be the two out there.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me in week 6. When they see the poor run.
Jeremiah Trotter.
I don't think it's going to happen week 1, but it wouldn't be if it happened during the season. Wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah. Do you see Jeremiah Trotter as a guy that can play at this level right away?
He's very instinctive. That's a positive. He's undersized. He's a lot like Nakobe Dean. Very instinctive player, undersized. Is he going to be able to hold up? He's not the best athlete in the world. They're very redundant almost.
So he's less. I guess I brought that question into the mix because TJ Edwards was a really good college linebacker, didn't test well, so doesn't get drafted, but had the instinctual ability and turned into a really good linebacker, even though he didn't have the traits.
Well, I'd say it's very similar from an instinct standpoint. The only difference is TJ was really big. TJ was
big guy.
242 and remade his body, and he was a monster, and he is a monster now. Those guys are undersized, so that to me would be the biggest difference. But they're very instinctive, both of them.
Got it.
And that's why I'm a little surprised that
to then go back to your original question, Zander, very fluid, still think that needs upgrade, right?
Yeah.
At Mike Gill show, I know you got a hard out at 9. So everybody, if you're local, because we have a lot of non-local listeners, but if you're local and you're heading for a respite down the shore, or listen to it on the app, 97.3 ESPN, the Sports Bash, 2 to 6, Mike Gill, best in the biz as far as I'm concerned. One last quick one, Mike. If I told you, Ed Kratz and I do top 25 Eagles every year, just pure football players. This year's A.J. Brown, which I think is pretty apparent. If I told you this time next year, Ed and I are doing this list, it's going to be Jaylen Carter. Think I'm crazy, or you think it's a possibility?
Oh, it's a possibility. Yeah, no doubt. And I think for this team to be a Super Bowl level team, he should be in the conversation for the top 2. At the end of the year, you would say this team made it to the Super Bowl or won the Super Bowl, and Jaylen Carter was the best player on the defense. I think for this defense to be that level of defense, he has to be that level of player, because I don't know that they have another guy on the defense. We always talked about back when the Eagles, Fletcher Cox was a younger player, and you would say, if you're the offensive coordinator for the team playing the Eagles, who's the guy that you're game planning for? Okay, 91 is right there. We got to figure out what to do with him. 98 has to become that player. They have to say, there's 98. What are we doing to stop him on this play? And if he doesn't make that jump, who's that guy on this team? Is Bryce Huff a guy that the other team, you might have to game plan him in certain spots, but not every play. 98, pretty much every play, you have to find where he is and what he's doing. So, yeah, it's A.J. Brown definitively number one. And if Jaylen Carter's in that conversation, the Eagles had a really good year.
I would agree with that for sure. Mike, thanks for joining the show, man. I know you got a heart out. We appreciate you being here. We'll talk to you next week. All right, Mike?
All right, see you guys.
Thanks, Mike.
Mike Gill joining us on Birds 365. Good stuff from Mike Gill. Good to get another perspective. Good breakdown of the defense through and through. Pretty much got to every position group there almost on the defense, and I thought Mike brought some good perspective. John, if you're telling me that Jaylen Carter might be the number one player, he'd have to have an all-pro season this year without a doubt, right?
Yeah, I think he's that kind of player. I think he's the most gifted football player on the Eagles. And I think he will be number one on this roster sooner rather than later. There's some concerns, maturity concerns, conditioning concerns. We talked about there's a reason he was the 9th pick in the draft and not the number 1 pick. But from just a pure physical talent perspective, he already is the most talented football player on the Eagles already today.
Really? You think over AJ?
Yeah, today. He's the most talented.
That's pretty big comment there, John. I mean, I get what you're saying from a raw talent perspective, but when I view AJ Brown, I think he's the guy that's like, he's got some crazy raw talent. But if you're telling me Jaylen Carter, you think is more raw talent, that's pretty wild statement.
Yeah, I don't even think it's that close, to be honest.
Really?
And people that listen to this show should know how much I respect AJ Brown.
Yeah,
who's a great player, and I put him number 1. And I've said he's the best. I've been on that ground floor that he's been the best player on the Eagles for essentially 2 years. And he's great, but Jaylen is, again, we're talking about a guy that if he didn't have the issues in Georgia, and they were significant issues, so I'm not trying to dismiss them, but if he did not have the issues, would have been in the conversation and likely would have been the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft. As a and imagine as a defensive tackle over a quarterback in this era.
When's the last time a defensive tackle was taken 1 overall?
That's the kind of talent he has. And, if you look at Aaron Donald, and I don't like to compare anybody to Aaron Donald, who was, I believe, 13th, but Aaron's undersized. So very small defensive tackle. And that's why he fell a little bit in the draft. And I always pat myself on the back because I called him the best player in that draft coming up to the draft. And I got one right for once. But with Jaylen Carter, he's huge. And the way he moves at his size is just doesn't happen every day. Like the Eagles just lost a potential Hall of Fame player, and I think should be a Hall of Fame player at defensive tackle, and Fletcher Cox. And as Mike just pointed out, I tell the story all the time. Every conference call we had with an opposing coach when we talked about the defense, got to block 91 and 55, 91 and 55, 91 and 55. 91 was always first. Jaylen Carter's got more talent than Fletcher Cox. And Fletcher would be the first to tell you that.
From a raw talent standpoint, that's pretty amazing comments. I mean, it's good to know that we have that guy on our team. I can't wait to see what he develops into. Let's get to our next commercial break. Coming up in about 20 minutes, we'll have BLG, Brandon Lee Gowton. It's going to be good to talk to him because he's another guy who's been down there for each day of practice, has his eyes and ears on the practice field. So we'll see what he's made of the first 5 days of practice so far. We'll dive into all that and then some offensive questions coming up next before we get to BLG. Appreciate everybody being here. Already up to 69 likes on the show. Appreciate you guys. If we could get to 100 likes, I think that's a good goal. I think we can get there. A lot of good viewership today, so we appreciate all you guys. Help us reach our like goal. Thanks so much for being here. Stay tuned. We'll be right back on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Win and save this baseball season from Colony Pools and Power Washing, a local company serving Delaware, Delco, and Chester County since 1970. Are you tired of looking at your green house? Is your roof, siding, deck stained green from algae and mold? Let the experts pressure wash your home and take the pressure off of you. Win with Colony Pools and Power Washing. Call them now at 302-762-2250. That's 302-762-2250.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction. Go with trust.
Go Birds!
And go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to a Wednesday edition of Birds 365. Back here in our normal time slot. We'll be in our normal time slot for the rest of the week, so appreciate all you guys being here this morning. A good crowd here, a lot of good comments, a lot of good viewership. We appreciate all of you guys. John, you're 5 days into practice. Will the offense live up to the expectation this year, John D. Mack?
I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if that's possible. You know, we had that kind of discussion with Mike, and he brought up Nick's most recent press conference and about people getting excited about, and I asked him the question about Jaylen, and he talked about what Mike said, about his command of the offense and sliding when he's getting a little bit of pressure and he hits Saquon on a check down or Kenny on a check down. And as Mike noted, people are very excited by that. But he also in the same press conference said, when he was talking about the receivers, you know, the passing game goes through who it goes through. And the rest of the guys are, you know, they're getting the scraps. I'm looking for the quote as I'm talking. The pass game offense is still going to run through Devontae, AJ, Dallas, and then who's the committee of the number 3 receiver? Who's the second tight end? Grant Calcaterra. Who's the back that we're trying to get the ball to start things off in the pass game? That's going to be Saquon. I know this is a cliche, but there are only so many plays in a football game. and there was only one ball, that to me was a clear effort to say, please understand the passing game's got to go through AJ, Devontae, and Dallas. And everybody else, including Saquon, unfortunately, for a lot of fans that are excited about it, everybody else is an afterthought. And that's the way it should be.
Yeah, in the passing game, I don't really care. I mean, look, I don't need to make Saquon the priority in the passing game, but they've shown that they're going to take the dump off a little bit more so, at least here early on in camp. They've been working on it. It's been a part of the offense. I think that's a positive role for Saquon in the passing game. If Hurts needs to take what's given to him a little bit more, I think that's positive. But you're right. They're not going to come out and game plan for Saquon Barkley in the passing game. But is he more of a lethal weapon if you need to make a dump off here and there? I think he is.
Probably. Andrew DeCecco and I were having a discussion.
He's great. We got to get Andrew on soon.
Yeah. Boy, this is going to upset me. I don't know if I want to go down this route.
Yeah, Johnny Mac. The truth hurts, but you got to go. You got to embrace the truth in this life.
Kenny's a better receiver
than Saquon.
Yeah. And they had him in the red zone yesterday, and like I said, he was making life hell for Nakobe Dean. I'm talking about Kenny Gainwell. And Andrew brought up a good point in that Saquon's big, obviously the Saquon. And when you get that big Saquon, you don't have as much shiftiness.
Yeah, he's not as elusive. He's a big body guy. I mean, it's tougher to.
So I don't know if you're getting the impact you thought, and I don't know. It's one practice, but Kenny was much more effective as a receiver in the red zone work. And at one point, and BLG will probably talk about this when he comes on. Saquon went the wrong way, at least from what it looked like, because Jalen Hurts was, after the play, basically telling him where to be. And I don't want to call it a dust up, but he was basically correcting him on the field, which you don't see a lot. Not that they're upset, because it's, who cares? It's practice. But yeah, I think that part of it is going to be more Kenny Gainwell than fans probably think and would like.
Yeah, so we're going to see how it works. You're right. That's going to fire some people up if they're using Kenny Gainwell in the passing game more than Saquon Barkley. But Kenny does have a wide receiver background. I mean, he played a lot.
Well, that's the
at
thing.
Memphis. Yeah, so.
And they've always used him a lot in high leverage spots because they trust him. Now I think that's going to shift to more Saquon. I'm not trying to say it's not, but I think Saquon's biggest impact is going to be as a running back, running the football, not catching it.
Yeah, and that's a tough hill to climb, because you're talking about 2 seasons of north of 1,000-yard rushers, north of 1,100-yard rushers, and if his role is only in the running game and I guess pass blocking, I don't know.
Well, he's going to have a role. He's a good receiver. He's, as a running back, he's a good receiver. I'm not trying to say the Eagles have 3 good receiving.
Yeah, but you're saying in moments when they need to use the running back as potentially a pass catcher, they're probably going to lean on Kenny.
Well, it's one practice. I don't think they're going to lean on Kenny the way they did previously, which is he was the third down back, because they have Saquon here for a reason to be the third down back, and pass protection is part of it, because he's a better pass protector. So I don't think it's going to be as drastic, but if they're trying to get a wheel route, if they're trying to, they might use Kenny to do that, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
Will Shipley has proven he had a great catch on a wheel route in between Julian Okwara and CJ Gardner-Johnson coming over for the help. He almost high pointed the football.
Will Shipley's had a better, at least it seems from the reports, he's had a better camp than he did OTA. So it seems like he's settled.
Yeah,
in.
he's gotten much. He looked overwhelmed when he first got here. Now he's settling down and he looks much better, which is, the hope for any rookie.
Right, exactly.
And he looks good as receiver. But Kenny's, as you mentioned, he played receiver at times in Memphis, in college in Memphis. He's a really natural receiver. That's all I'm saying. He's a better receiver. Andrew would agree with me if he was here, but he's not here.
Well, John, I mean, here's the thing I'll go back to as we have this conversation. You had people love to call you the Saquon hater in the chat, and I see a couple of them now already, but you had a pretty lofty,
I expect more out of him than Bill Spadaro, our buddy.
Do you want to revise that, or do you still think
no?
1,300
yards between 300 and 400 receiving.
Looking at
1,300 yards on the ground. Look, I started. Moz got 1269 2 years ago, so that's my template. It's got to be a little bit better than Miles, so I got him at 1,300. If he's healthy, this counts on health. You got to be healthy.
Yeah, which we'll see if he can play also.
And then 300 or 400 more in the passing game, which is not a ton, but that's solid. And I think if you said 1,700 total yards, which I said, and I've said consistently, in the Saquon lovers like a Bill Spadaro and Zander Krause.
You keep putting me in that conversation.
Have not gone. They didn't go near that number, but yet I'm the Saquon hater. Hey, look in the mirror. It doesn't make sense. I just tell you the truth.
Well, how much do you think it's a positive effect for Barkley to go from the offensive line and the team around him he had in New York to a team like Philadelphia?
It's a huge advantage for him. Yeah, no question about it. But there's two things. First, it's going to help him a lot in the running game. He didn't even get to 1,000 yards last year and he was under 4 yards a carry because of the crappy offensive line, with the exception of Andrew Thomas. And I got him at 1,300 because of the line he's going to play behind. It's going to be a huge advantage for him. But remember, in the passing game, like he was a bigger deal in the passing game in New York, who had no receivers. Well, here they got A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert. So on the passing game, he's not going to be nearly as important as he was in New York.
Right. They got better options.
Yeah. So in the running game, yes. In the passing game, no. Because he was a big deal. If you go back to 2022 when they had the one outlier season and made the playoffs and actually won a playoff game. And boy, Kevin O'Connell should be ashamed of himself, but I digress. I don't know. He'd call it 50-something balls. But again, when we talk about here's Saquon's numbers, 2021, 41 catches for 263, 6.4 yards per catch. 2022, the one outlier season, 57 for 338, 5.9 yards per catch. 2023 last year, 41 catches, 280, 6.8. He's not that explosive as a receiver because of what Andrew and I were talking about. But that 2022 season, he had 1,312 yards on the ground, 57 catches for 338 yards. That's what you're looking at. That's what you're looking at.
Listen, I know not everybody likes John's take on Saquon, but that doesn't sound like a hater to me. To think that you're going to have somebody get 1,700 plus yards, that's not hating. Maybe it's not reaching the expectations that you have for the guy, but holy moly, John, that's a lot of yards for a guy. I mean, if he does that, I think everybody's going to be pretty dang happy. Let me go to this comment though, and let me hear what you think of this, because this is kind of in the boat that I think I am. Chan checks in. What's up, Chan? Thanks for being here, buddy. Saquon going to have a bigger impact, even if the numbers don't show it. He's going to help stress the defense. Would you agree with that?
I've literally been talking about that since day one. That's his biggest.
Yeah.
As long as he has an impact, I don't care personally. I mean, and fans shouldn't care about the numbers as long as the impact is there. And I brought up a play early in camp, might have been day 1 or day 2, where the Eagles threw out an option look, and Jalen Hurts faked the pitch to Saquon Barkley, and the defense flowed to Barkley, and he kept the ball, and he got a big gain up the middle. And that's an impact. And no stats for Saquon Barkley, but that's an impact. It would have been a 15, maybe 20-yard gain for Jalen Hurts. That is more important. Yes, can he have an impact? I talk all the time. Devin White's been in his hip on those wheel routes. But you're taking Devin White out of the play. Is that create space for AJ, Devontae, Dallas? That's an impact. It's not going to show up on the stat sheet. So I agree. That's the more important part of it. What kind of impact does he have on this offense? More than, but everybody loves, loves numbers, and they want numbers.
No doubt about that. Everybody loves their numbers.
So yeah, impact to me is much more important. But I brought up that Nick quote because I think he's trying to prepare people. Only so many plays in a football game, and there's only one ball, and the pass offense runs through AJ, Devontae, Dallas Goedert.
We'll see how it all works. A lot of focus on the Saquon Barkley and the Eagles offense coming into the year. I have pretty high expectations for all of them, and I think they're going to live up to them. We'll see how it all plays out so far. Pretty good camp. Let's get to our next commercial break. Coming up next, Brandon Lee Gowton. So we'll get another guy who's been down at practice, has consumed all of the practices so far. We'll get his take on Saquon and on the offense and the defense and all the different talking points coming out of training camp so far. Thanks for being here, everybody. Appreciate all the comments. A lot of good ones out there today, as there always is. We appreciate you guys. Drop a like. Stay tuned, Birds 365. We'll be right back.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Is the best vacation one that you find, or one you get lost in? One that takes you to new heights, or reminds you to go with the flow? To get your feet wet and your wheels spinning? One that lets you find your own rhythm, or get carried away? Find the best of yourself. Get lost in the woods. Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
Win and save this baseball season from Colony Pools and Power Washing, a local company serving Delaware, Delco, and Chester County since 1970. Are you tired of looking at your green house? Is your roof, siding, deck stained green from algae and mold? Let the experts pressure wash your home and take the pressure off of you. Win with Colony Pools and Power Washing. Call them now at 302-762-2250. That's 302-762-2250.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction, go with trust, and go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to Birds 365, a Wednesday edition here, joined now by Brandon Lee Gowton, BLG from Bleeding Green Nation. BLG, welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
Thanks for having me, guys.
Good to see you, BLG. I don't want to start with Saquon. We were on the Saquon. I feel like I always do that to you because you're one of the only open-minded. So we'll talk about the play, the Jalen Hurts play, when they were not on the same page. But I don't want to start there. I've been saying this. I don't know why I got on this tangent, but Ed Krause and I do our top 25 Eagles, just pure football players every year. Regardless of position. So it's not impact. It would always be the quarterback. It would always. And number one for us was A.J. Brown, unanimously. I think that's pretty clear. But I think at this time next year, it might be Jaylen Carter. Is that too much, or are you? That guy's unbelievable, BLG.
Yeah, I was talking to our good friend Chil Kapati about this, and I think he put it well in that, like, there's no kind of level for Jaylen Carter that I think is too high to ascribe to him right now and his potential. And that might seem like hyperbole, but I don't think it is. Like, I honestly think he's kind of being under discussed relative to when you think about this Eagles 2024 outlook. We're always talking about Saquon or Jalen Hurts or Nick Sirianni or Kellen Moore or Vic Fangio. Like, those are five names I think I just listed before we even get to Jaylen Carter, who could be incredibly dominant this year after he showed signs of that as a rookie last year. Like an Aaron Donald-like pace before the defense fell off. Looked dominant in practice yesterday. Yeah, he's amazing.
BLG, let me ask you about Quinyon Mitchell. He's made a lot of headlines so far in camp. What have you seen from the rookie first-round draft pick? A lot of talk about his one-on-ones with A.J. Brown. What have you seen from Quinyon Mitchell at camp so far?
Yeah, Quinyon had his best day on Tuesday. That's an encouraging sign. We haven't seen him really, on the outside so much with the first team yet, but I think they're clearly trying to find a role for him if he doesn't end up starting out there, which he could, on the inside, where, we've seen him line up yesterday in the slot. He's obviously been in there in dime packages as well. So my thing with Quinyon is that I think he's coming along nicely. I think even, again, if he doesn't win that outside starting cornerback job, he's going to be on the field in some capacity playing, just because the talent is there and he was their first round pick. They want to see him out there. But very encouraging for him to go up against A.J. Brown and not only obviously have the results of the pass breakup or tight defense, and then the one rep where Jalen Hurts doesn't even throw the ball, which is you just don't even see that in one-on-one, where the quarterback won't even attempt to throw. but also the swagger afterwards. I think you want to see that in your cornerbacks. And Quinyon's a soft-spoken guy, but I think he seems to be showing he has that mentality of a cornerback, and I think that's an encouraging sign.
Yeah, that was a great story in the spring, BLG, when, he was so quiet. He didn't say anything. AJ was telling the story, and then all of a sudden he perked up and said trash wrap just out of nowhere. And AJ's like, what? What? But I don't think it's by accident that the Eagles are having Quinyon match up with AJ in one-on-ones back-to-back days. I think, boy, they're throwing a lot at him, and he doesn't seem overwhelmed at all. That's my most positive takeaway with Quinyon Mitchell. as you mentioned, he's played left corner, right corner, nickel, dime. He's doing one-on-ones with A.J. Brown, and he seems ho-hum. He's got a lot of – that's what you want. That's exactly what you want from your cornerbacks, because you're going to get beat in this league. And if you don't have confidence, that's when guys start going down a bad road. I'd be stunned if he's not a starter against the Green Bay Packers in Brazil, BLG.
You think on the outside, or what do you think exactly?
I think right now it's going to be the slot, depending, because I think Cooper's been pushed back a little bit. Cooper Team. So, hopefully he gets back in the 3-week span that was sort of intimated. But I think that pushes back Cooper maybe week 3, week 4, week 5. And all of a sudden, it'll probably be Ringo or Rodgers outside, one of those two guys. Quinyon Mitchell in the slot, and obviously Slay. That's kind of my thought process on week 1. Week 5, week 6, I think might be Mitchell inside, Cooper, Mitchell outside, Cooper inside with Slay. I think that's where they want to go, at least. Is that your thought?
I think you're hitting on the fact that I think it's not as simple as, this person won the cornerback battle coming out of training camp, and that's who they're going to stick with definitely the whole year. I think that's a situation that's going to be fluid, and maybe someone like Isaiah Rodgers I still leaning towards him right away, but then, I think he could be usurped, if the young guys, if he doesn't play, obviously continue to play and prove he deserves to be out there. I think they're not going to hesitate to get those young guys involved if they won't be already. So I think that's pretty reasonable. Again, I just think Quinyon Mitchell is going to have some kind of role on this team. I think it's more of just figuring out exactly what it is.
Bill G, let me ask you about QB1, Jalen Hurts coming off an OTA. That wasn't very rave reviews. What have you seen so far from Jalen Hurts here in training camp? You've obviously been down there for the first 5 days of practice. What have you seen from Jalen Hurts?
Yeah, overall encouraged, and certainly looking a lot better than we saw him back in the spring practices. Thought the first 2 days really stood out. Really liked how comfortable he looked. The Eagles using a lot of tempo, pre-snap motion. I thought he was really efficient. Ball was not really hitting the ground. For the most part in training camp, he has not put the ball in harm's way. I think that's been really important. He did have a turnover-worthy throw on Tuesday. Almost got picked off.
Kaylee's got to come up with that, BL.
Yeah. You can't throw right to Keely Ringo and get away with that. Or apparently you can if Keely's not going to catch it. So, tough job by Keely there. But, that throw aside has not really put the ball in harm's way at all. I think he's been really good with his decision making, getting the ball out quick at times. The past couple of days, a little bit slower. Offensive line hasn't really helped him out with the defensive line kind of getting a lot of pressure. But again, overall, big picture, I'm feeling more encouraged than not about Jalen Hurts.
Are you concerned at all through bye practices? There hasn't been one interception. I mean, because remember, that's not only Jalen Hurts. That's Kenny Pickett. That's Tanner McKee. Guy Gardner almost had an interception on the last play in developmental, but wasn't able to keep it in bounds. You usually see guys are trying things. They're maybe attempting throws that they wouldn't do in a regular season game. This secondary, at least early on, and we've already seen it. We've seen the Vic Fangio scheme, BLG, for 3 years now. They might be very passive. They're constantly lining up too high with too high safeties. Any concern with that at all?
I didn't even think about how none of the quarterbacks have thrown any, and especially because last year didn't take long, I think, for Marcus Mariota to throw a bunch of them in practice settings. That stands out, especially as the contrast to the spring where there was a ton of interceptions and defensive backs just making plays on the ball. I think that's a fair point. Yeah, we haven't seen defensive backs, I think, get their hands on the ball quite as much. I think back to last year, Reed Blankenship, I thought, was having a much more active training camp. Not that he's been bad this year, but he just was so much more active last year by contrast. And, I didn't really think about that till now. So maybe there's something to that, or maybe.
Well, my concern is he's lining up where we park on every play. That's where Reed Blankenship starts. So it's tough to get involved if you're in the parking lot. And that's
right.
where the safeties are lining up, basically.
Mm.
That's my concern, especially when you have CJ, because CJ's a playmaker. And by the way, if CJ isn't making plays, you're going to probably hear some chirping too. That might be a concern down the road.
Yeah, the CJ DJ Vic Fangio fit, given what happened, and what we heard from Miami, is going to be, that's a pretty interesting one, I think.
Yeah. He's great, by the way. They had a ton of red zone. First time, by the way. That was weird too. We went through 4 practices, Brandon, no red zone work. And then we got a boatload of it. Yesterday's practice, some good, pretty offense, some bad. I thought it was pretty much a stalemate. I think overall, a couple things stood out. One, that Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley play, which I want you to address if you saw it and paid attention to it. And then there was a lot of Kenny Gainwell again. Is that going to upset people? Is that a thing, or is that one day and you're not too worried about it?
I mean, Nick Sirianni was wearing a Kenny Gainwell t-shirt on Monday, right? So can't tell me it's nothing. The Saquon play, I don't know what your read on it, John. Looked to me just like was not on the same page. Kind of just threw wide of him. And Saquon was like looking at him after that miss, kind of being like, "Hey, like what happened there?" And shame too, because he was wide open. So I guess.
But Jalen sort of ran the route of how he wanted to run it afterwards.
Okay,
like he
I didn't
stayed
see
on
that
the
part.
field. And he was saying, "No, you should be here." Could have could have been the other. Could have been Jalen on the wrong page. But either way, he looked on the same page with Kenny. Kenny was making life hell for Nakobe Dean in coverage.
I will say, I think overall how crisp the Eagles have been stands out to me relative to last year when I thought it was sloppier. And I think that's not just an accident. I think, to Nick Sirianni's credit, I will give Nick Sirianni credit here and say, I think, he is feeling the pressure, and Paris Campbell's comments reflected this too, when he was talking about how the intensity kind of really was starting to ramp up back all the way back in OTAs, and it wasn't like they eased into it like he had been elsewhere before in his career. So I think
Giants,
Colts. I think there's something to that, and I think again, other than some few mistakes that are bound to happen, I think they've been overall pretty sharp.
BLG, let's stay on the offensive side of the ball there and talk about wide receiver 3. You just brought up Paris Campbell. Are you leaning any one way or the other on who might win that job? It's obviously a big drop off after AJ and Devontae, and with Kellen Moore, who's obviously going to move these wide receivers around. I think that's a more important position this year than it has been in years past. What do you think of that position? And is any one player emerging at that spot for you?
Yeah, I don't think anyone is truly running away with that job. I mean, we've seen John Ross get a fair share of first-team reps here, but I don't think he's done a whole lot with them. Had a good practice. I think it was over the weekend, Monday. So, I mean, Paris Campbell has caught, I think, pretty much everything that's been thrown his way, but hasn't really done a lot in the way of flash. Britton Covey has a ton of catches here. Johnny Wilson's mixing in at the first team. Again, hasn't really seen him do a lot in team drills as much as he's been looking good in one-on-one. And, I kind of wonder if it just could be something of like a committee approach there at wide receiver 3, depending on where they are down in distance, depending where they are on the field. I think there could kind of be like a wide receiver 3 by committee, at least as opposed to in the past where, Quez Watkins was just that guy.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think they'll give Britton a chance? Because other than AJ and Devontae, I think no Eagles receiver generates more consistent separation than Britton Covey. Now he's playing in the slot mainly. He's not an outside guy. And Kellen Moore mentioned, he's going to move around Devontae and AJ. So if Devontae's in the slot, that would mean Britton Covey's got to play outside, which probably not going to work out. So do you think they'll give him a legitimate shot to even piecemeal it like you were describing?
I do. I think he's kind of like worked his way into that where I think that's, and that was something he talked about, I think towards the end of last year, like that's the next evolution of Britton Covey. Like like wanting to kind of finally get that offensive role, especially now that he's proven his worth as a punt returner and one of the best ones in the league. And you even saw the Eagles kind of throw him a bone a little bit last year where later in the season, after he had, a bunch of good returns, they gave him like one of his first ever offensive touch. So I think there could be something more to that and kind of building that into this offseason. Not that he's going to be a feature player, but I do buy that he could have an offensive role. He had a really good catch from Kenny Pickett over the weekend, I believe it was. I think
that was a good throw. That might have been Kenny's best throw.
Great throw, tough catch. Yeah, I think Britton Covey belongs as a role player in this offense.
Yeah. Good. We'll see what he's able to do. BLG, one player I want to ask you about is Nakobe Dean on the defensive side of the football. A lot of Zach Bond, a lot of Devin White. I mean, I know they're rotating. I've talked to John a lot about how much Vic is rotating players through, but specifically Nakobe Dean. What have you seen from him in camp? Does it look like he's going to have a bigger role in this team than he has in years past?
Yeah, I think it's noteworthy that, when you look at the cornerbacks, the first team defense each day, the first 11-on-11 series, it's been different. You look at Isaiah Rodgers the first day, then 3 days of Keeley, then back to Isaiah Rodgers on day 5. By contrast, the Eagles are not rotating the first team linebackers each day. It's consistently been Zach Bond and Devin White. So that kind of stands out to me. Not to say Nakobe Dean won't have a role, but I don't know, just how keen they are still on him being this full-time starter who's going to play like all of the snaps, their top linebacker by any means. So I still only really notice Nakobe Dean the most when I feel like he's kind of trailing in coverage and has not stood out to me out that way. I think, if you can sell me on, he's been better, rushing the passer or defending the run. But yeah, I'm not buying Nakobe Dean in coverage by any means still.
No, Kenny had his way, as I kind of mentioned, in red zone work, and it was usually Nakobe in coverage, trailing, as BLG said. Why is Nick Gates here? What is going on? Are you a little bit concerned with this interior offensive line? Because that defensive front the past 2 days, I mean, they've been relentless, number one, on the quarterback. And that's sort of been, Jaylen was lights out for the first 3 days. It hasn't been as good, but that's because of the pass rush. It's just all over him. You've had some injury issues. Landon Dickerson wasn't able to finish practice. I thought it was a positive sign. He had his helmet. He walked back out and watched it at least for a while. He's been dealing with, he tweaked his knee. I don't know if you saw that on early in practice. What day are we? I don't even know. Monday, he tweaked his knee early, but managed to go throughout the practice. He had the lacerated toe as well. Tyler Steen's out. They already have Matt Hennessy and Matt Sharping. How many interior, just serviceable guys do you need? What did it say to you? What the first thing when you saw, Eagles signed it? Why? What was your first thought?
Yeah, I mean, I'm intrigued to see where he lines up, to start. Obviously some of the first team shifting has impacted the second team. Maybe they don't love what they've seen out of Dylan McMahon, and want Nick Gates to be that second team center in there. I saw Matt Hennessy have a bad rep in team drills where he just got beat instantly. I forget who it was by. Maybe they don't necessarily love what they've seen out of Hennessy. Obviously, they haven't jumped at the chance to put him in the starting lineup when there's been an opportunity to fill a spot, whether that's for Dickerson or Steen or whatever. Maybe, like you said, I'm sure some of it is they kind of just want another body there after having all these injuries, and hard to ever complain about adding an experienced offensive lineman with a 90-man roster spot. Why not? Why not give it a shot?
Well, they do have 75 corners, so unfortunately, Mario Goodrich was the one to go. I just thought it was interesting because I'm like, well, I mean, isn't there some redundancy? But you're right, Hennessy hasn't stood out. Sharping, it was interesting. I think he was taking right tackle reps at one point, which he's never played there. And maybe they did this last year with Josh Andrews. Remember, they couldn't get a decent backup snapper
Yeah.
And Marcus Mariota was playing shortstop basically the entire camp. So maybe it's just about getting better reps.
Mm-hmm.
Because if guys are just exploding off the line, you're ruining reps.
Yeah.
So maybe it's as simple as that. You don't think he's relevant to making this team, do you?
Barring injury, no, I would think not, and especially because if he's out on the market here, late July, feels like a guy that if you really wanted to keep around, you could keep him around your practice squad or something.
That's true too. Good point. You've talked me off the ledge. I was a little. I'm like, why is this? And maybe, I went to a dark place thinking maybe Landon's injuries more difficult than they thought, or Tyler Steen's ankle is going to be longer than they perceived. But then I thought about Josh Andrews and said, maybe they just want some good second team reps. And hopefully that's the case as a whole. Somebody asked this question in the chat. I thought it was a good one. So I'm going to ask it to you, BLG. Best positional group through these 5 days, not just the starters, because then it's AJ and Devontae. But when you count the reserves, first, second, third team reps, I guess deepest position on this team so far.
I think in terms of like best that we've seen in camp, and maybe this is recency bias, but I really like what I've seen out of the defensive line.
Yes, that's where I went. That's where I went.
Yeah. I mean, they've been dominating the past 2 days, especially. Again, they've been dominating practice. Like, I think there's just points where offense can't even get into what they want to do because the defense is just wrecking stuff out there.
Yeah. And it's even guys, lower guys. You've seen good snaps from Marlon T. You've seen good snaps from Moro Ojomo at times. You've seen even PJ Mustafa flash a little bit. So I think from the depth perspective, now the one guy who's kind of been invisible, not bad. I haven't seen a lot from Bryce Huff. Yep. And I'm very high on him. I've been very high. I probably said it to you on the show. I'm not panicking, but I haven't seen a lot from Bryce Huff. Any concern there yet?
I would say no, because he's going up against two pretty good tackles, and I think that's a factor. Now, of course, you're gonna want him to beat good tackles in the real games, but I also think back to I don't think, and I'm probably one of the highest people on Hassan Reddick, and I don't think he was ever necessarily like a dominant practice player. Not that he didn't have his moments, but I think early on too, it wasn't like the Eagles signed Hassan Reddick in day one. He was just dominating out there in the practice setting. So I'm willing to give Bryce Huff a little bit of grace here, those things considered. However, it would be nice to see a flash here and there. That would be encouraging and would make me feel good about it. But I am by no means ready to panic about that.
BLG, I want to zoom out a little bit, and I want to let you take me down whatever path you're thinking. Where are you 5 days into camp here? What thing are you watching most, whether it's a player, a storyline, a position battle? What's got your interest that you're watching the most after 5 days of training camp?
Well, I think going back to Hurts, I think what made the first few days really encouraging was not just only having a good day, but the ability to stack those good days, to pull the coach speak into it. I think that's really important. The consistency of it. Anyone can have a good day and then they have a bad day the next day. And the inconsistency, I think it says a lot more if you're able to kind of stack those days like Jaylen did at the beginning of camp more so. And intrigued here to see, how he adjusts, because I think the defense probably took it on them to have some more pride too after the offense was getting the better of them early on, to kind of want to step up and show that okay, we're here too. And I think it'll be interesting to see, okay, can Jaylen kind of counter the counter and get back to looking sharper like he did earlier in camp.
Yeah, Nick kind of mentioned there's ebbs and flows to it when he was talking about training camp as a whole, and that's certainly the case. If there was one player, I don't want to say standout, but one guy that let's use the term underrated, that has consistently shown up but maybe doesn't get the hype that Quinyon Mitchell as a first-round pick gets, or Jaylen Carter as a potential future superstar. I keep landing on the defensive front, and for me, that's Milton Williams. Anybody like that for you?
I do agree with the Milton Williams pick. I believe he had a sack on early. I'm also forgetting the days here. Like day 3 or day 4.
Yeah, it all runs together.
It tipped a pass the line of scrimmage yesterday. I definitely think Milton has been looking good, and he's been active, I would say. I guess I have to give credit here to Will Shipley, who's been active.
Been good,
yeah. He kind of, and as we talked about in the show here, back in OTAs, I think he had a little bit of a rough start this first couple days. John, you put it as he was fighting the ball. He very much was. And ever since then, he had that one OTA or mini camp practice where he kind of like it clicked for him. And I think he's carried that momentum over in camp here, where he just looks really natural catching the football. He was getting some first team red zone reps yesterday, so it wasn't just like Saquon was out, like, Saquon was available. So, I think that's a good sign. I think he's going to have some kind of factor into this offense.
Yeah. He was high. That wheel route,
yes.
BLG, he high pointed it almost.
Yes. Yep. Yeah.
Which is really rare for a running back to go up and get the ball like that. I was really impressed with Will Shipley. I'm going to end it with some Saquon Barkley hate. At Brandon Gowton, people think I by the way, is this hate, BLG? I said he's going to get 1,300 yards and 300 or 400 more receiving. 1,700 total, and that's hating, evidently. But
it's better than DeAndre Swift last year.
Exactly. At Brandon Gowton, bleedinggreennation.com. Read him there. Listen to him. He's all over the place. He's good enough to give us time. You mentioned you were on with Shield, our buddies at PHLY. So BLG's all over the place, doing a great job in training camp. Is Saquon the third best receiving back on this team? just from a pure catching the football perspective. Like to me, there's no question he's number 2. But has Will Shipley, is he a more natural pass catcher?
I think if you were going to frame it as like, if I can only pick one of these running backs to catch a ball downfield, maybe, and my life is on the line, I think I might have to go Will Shipley, which is how natural he looks. I don't know that. I think to a bigger point on Saquon, and it's training camp, and I'm sure they're not trying to really exhaust him and all the things they want to do with him.
No, in this kind of wise, setting, by the way.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And there's no criticism here of how they're handling him, but it's kind of what I said back in the spring, where I'm not seeing like, oh my gosh, this is like breathtaking, amazing, popping off the screen. This is, why the Eagles signed Saquon. I haven't seen that moment yet. It could come. It could easily be on the way. Just haven't seen it yet.
We'll see how it all plays out. BLG, thanks for joining the show, man. A lot of good insight from you. I've been down there at practice. Enjoy the practice tomorrow, a live one, the open practice, first one, only one at the link. BLG, we appreciate you being here. Thanks, man.
See you guys.
Thanks, bud.
There's BLG joining us on Birds 365. Good stuff from BLG. Johnny Mack, the Saquon Barkley truthers are out in the chat right now. They are not happy.
Oh, I know. Believe me, I know. He gets the most cheers. You think about it. Well, I don't want to say more than the quarterback.
I know, but John, in 45 minutes, you dropped him from the second best pass catcher in the backfield to the third.
I said, Izzy, and you just heard Brandon.
I know. It's not just you.
If you want somebody to catch the football down the field, and your life depends on it, I'm putting him third. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. But here's the positive note. They're all 3 are above average catching the football. So Kenny's really, really, really good catching the football. Will, like he had some troubles early, but I think he was nervous. I think it was one of those things as a rookie player getting And since things have slowed down for him a little bit, he's settled down and gotten to show his abilities a little bit more. He's a natural pass catcher. Like I said, you rarely see running backs high point the football. That's a rare, and that's what he did. It's not that he's bad. When you compare him to normal running backs like Kendall Milton or Lou Nichols or Ty Davis Price has 4 drops over the past 2 days.
Yeah.
He can't catch a cold. He can't catch spiking COVID. So I'm not saying I'm saying it's more of I know people aren't going to say it, but it's more a positive to just how good Kenny and Will have been catching the football.
We'll see how it all plays out this year. I got high expectations for the offense, but we'll see how they use Saquon Barkley and then whether Johnny Mack turns out to be right about Saquon or not. Anyway, by the way, I know everybody thinks he's a hater. 1,700 all-purpose yards is a pretty damn good season.
And by the way, because that's another thing I think people are not understanding. Because you can catch a football better does not mean that Kenny Gainwell or Will Shipley are better players than Saquon Barkley. Let me make that clear. They are not. They just catch the football better. That's it. They don't run as better. They don't block as they're not better football players. I'm just saying they catch the football more naturally. They're better. That's it. Even after what you do with it when you do catch it. I'm saying just the pure mechanics of catching a football, they're better at that aspect.
I mean, I see what you're saying. I want to launch some sort of a promotion here on Birds 365. And I want you to give me your opinion. I want all of our chatters to give me their opinion as well. We need to do some sort of a Saquon Barkley jersey giveaway or something. Maybe it's every time Saquon has more than, what's a good number in a game? 150 yards, 100.
Oh, that's a lot. That's a lot.
100 yards. I mean, if I do 100 yards, I'm going to be giving away a jersey every week. But if it's every time, maybe 125. Every time he surpasses that number, if he does 125.
Well, I would say 125 because 1,700, which is my prediction, and everybody's under it over 17 games is 100 a game. So that's 100 all-purpose yardage. So if you're at 125 or 130, that's a really big game in the modern NFL for a running back.
Big picket, total yards. Yep. So, all right, I might set that up. I got to talk to the powers that be, maybe. If I'd like to launch this because I think it would be a good way to tie our show into what happens in the games and give everybody something to look forward to. If you're a channel member, so we have many of channel members. If you are a channel member and Saquon Barkley eclipses 125 all-purpose yards in a game, we will give away a Saquon Barkley jersey up to and including the playoffs. So that means it could be up to 20 Saquon jerseys this year, and I'd like to give it only to our channel members. So if you want to get involved in that, let's do that. Twiz is saying 17 giveaways. We'll see. I mean, he's got to eclipse the 125, but if he does,
if he eclipses 125 for 17 games,
oh boy, that's a hell of a season, Johnny.
He's having
that's the point, though. You'll be eating your words a little bit at least if he does that. So I think it's a way for the Saquon truthers to kind of, either get back at you or get their revenge in a way on you. Maybe one of them will win a jersey. I'll figure out how to give them out, but that would be pretty fun.
Yeah, I will freely admit if you got to give out 17, I will freely admit I'm wrong. That would be 21, more than 2,100 all-purpose yards if he kept that up for 17 games. So that would be a very, very successful season.
That would be pretty. Maybe what I'll do is I'll have John pick the winner. So if you mess with John enough, maybe you'll just get the winner. Maybe he'll just pick you as the winner. Let's go to our 2 super chats here. I'm going to need more of these guys. If I'm giving away 20 Saquon jerseys, holy moly, that's going to cost us a pretty penny. James Carver says, "Oh, we're gonna give Will an excuse of rookie on drops, but no, not for Anias."
Come on,
what? Best player. SMH.
Let me just say this about James. You should be thrilled that you're not at practice. It has not gone well for your guy. Now, the difference is Will started poorly and has gotten progressively better, and now he's high pointing the football. Anias has not gotten progressively better. He just had a drop earlier this week. Not getting a ton of reps, was with the third group on kickoff returns, which should be somewhere where he could be impactful. Yeah, he hasn't been good. Now, doesn't mean he can't right the ship, but no pun intended, Will Shipley's kind of righted the ship from his slow start. Anias has not yet done that.
James Carver, your boy's got to step up, man, or else you're the president of a not a very good fan club. I'll just say that. So let's hope Anias can turn it around a little bit. Carver also checks in with another super chat. Have J-Mac sign the Saquon.
I don't think people want that.
I don't know. Maybe they would, John. It's an ode to Birds 365 and their continued support of the show.
They want to get Saquon to. But I'd get the Jim Brown throwback if you're a fan of football. I don't think he's going to be Jim Brown. Just a hunch.
We'll see how it goes. I will do the giveaway, though. Prince says we should do one for Jaylen 4K Club on Sills. That's a good idea as well. Sills doesn't think Hurts is going to have 4,000 passing yards. He hasn't yet in his career. So maybe we'll launch some sort of giveaway.
By the way, if you have again, this is to Nick's point. If the quarterback's thrown for 4,000 yards, he better get the ball to the receivers. And if the receivers are getting the ball as they should be, everybody wants AJ at 1,500. Everybody wants Devontae over 1,000 again. Everybody wants Dallas Goedert to step up and have that 1,000-yard year. Where are these 2,100 all-purpose yards coming from with Saquon? There's one football, people. One football.
Let's see. Let me do some real quick math, John, on the fly here. Let's say Saquon has, well, if he has 17 for the sake of the thing, 125 times 17 is what?
Over 2,100.
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, 21-25. That would be a pretty damn good season. So we'll see how many jerseys we end up giving away. James Carver, another super chat. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. All the super chats are much appreciated. All the financial support of the channel goes a long way. So thank you, guys. James says, I'm kidding. I'm anointed to abdicate my Anias Smith prez, but J-Mac can't pick winners or I will never win. We'll come up with a way to pick winners, but I will do channel members. That's what I want to do. You at least got to be a member on the channel to get
very objective. I don't care. I can pick the winner. I'm very objective.
So yeah, Johnny Mac isn't a very objective, smart, logical man. So I would have no worries about that. Anyway, appreciate you all being here. Another good show today. Good viewership. Did we get through 100 likes? We did. 102 likes. Thank you guys for the likes on the show today. We appreciate it. Fly Parks, Quan Pugh, who had the good comment earlier in the show. Quan, we appreciate you, brother. James Jones, our resident Commander fan. James, I'll make a thing for you too, where if your man Jaden Daniels can do anything this year, maybe I'll buy you a Jaden Daniels jersey, or maybe you already got one.
I haven't seen. I'm so bogged down with the Eagles, but I'm a big Jaden Daniels guy.
I am too, but we'll see what he's able to do. I mean, I've heard some pretty crazy expectations for the Washington Commanders coming into the year. They haven't won a playoff game, John, in 19 years.
Yeah, well, Daniel Snyder, they've been a disaster. So I did see a clip of people. Commanders fans, which is good, they were lining up for training camp, which, so they're excited. They should be. I mean, just getting that albatross off their head, that's a big, Daniel Snyder was a disaster, and now they have at least some hope. So that's a good thing for the Washington fans.
We'll see how it goes down there. You're giving James Jones a lot of hope on the way out here, Johnny.
Well, hey, they deserve some. Giants are probably the worst team. Not probably.
Giants stink.
I mean, on paper, they look just like a disaster.
Yeah, Daniel Jones. I mean, it's just practice footage, but good Lord, some of the footage coming out on Daniel Jones does not look good.
Well, you see footage and some of the rookie quarterbacks as well. I've seen some bad footage, and people overrate practice footage or one rep, but that does, to bring it back to the Eagles, to end on the Eagles. It is rare when you get through 5 training camp practices with no interceptions. Again, we're talking about more than Jalen Hurts. It's Tanner McKee as well, and Kenny Pickett as well. So,
is it a credit to the quarterbacks, or is it a knock on the defense?
Yeah, I think the coverage has been very, very soft. As I said,
is that a product of the defense, though, John? Isn't that a product of kind of the way Vic Fangio likes to play?
It is, and we've seen it in the past, and people have been upset by it. So they better be upset by it, even with Vic Fangio's name on it. But it's been more, I would say, softer, I would say. Now, maybe that's the young corners. Maybe he's trying to protect him. Maybe he's trying to protect the linebackers. A lot of things factor into it. But again, on the vast majority of plays, now yesterday was a little bit different because they were in the red zone. But when they're got the full field sessions going on, Reed Blankenship and CJ Gardner-Johnson, 90+% of the time, are lined up in split safety looks in another county. And that's why you've seen a lot of underneath throws and all that kind of stuff. And hopefully it changes at some point.
We'll see how it all works. We'll be back here tomorrow at 8 a.m. for our normal time slot again. Thanks, everybody, for checking in. I will stick to my word on the Saquon Barkley giveaway. We're going to do it. We set the number 125 all-purpose yards. If Saquon eclipses that in a given week, we will give away one Saquon jersey to a member of the channel on JAKIB Sports. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give away whatever color jersey they wore that week. So if it's the white, if it's the Kelly green, if it's if it's midnight green, we will give away that color jersey.
Kelly Green Week's going to excite the people.
Yeah, well, he's going to have to get his 125 or else they're going to be shit out of luck, Johnny Mac. All right, John, thanks for the show today, man. Great stuff from you. As always, thanks to our 2 guests, Mike Gill and Brandon Lee Gowton. Thanks to all of our viewers in the chat. You guys are the best. I appreciate you all very much. Johnny Mac, thank you, sir. I'll see you tomorrow. All right, brother.
All right, thanks, everybody.
See you next time on Birds 365, everybody.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.